Men, do you ever feel like you just can't get ahead? Like you're misunderstood? Like you have no one to talk to that truly hears you?
And women, are you often frustrated, hurt, and saddened in your relationships with the men in your life?
What if there were a community of like-minded men going through the same challenges that would support, hear, and understand what you're going through?
Working together in unison to create understanding, intimacy, and strong connections. That's the Way of the Illuminated Warrior.
Way of the Illuminated Warrior Talk Show is a forum of candid conversations for men and women about men. Being a man today is not always easy. Until now.
All right, welcome back to another adventure of the Way of the Illuminated Warrior Talk Show. I'm your host, Waska, here with my co-host, Beth Perojic. How are you doing today, Beth?
I'm doing very, very well. I'm very happy to be here. Highlight of my day.
All right. Well, hopefully it just keeps getting better and better. Yeah. So today's topic is going to be, is it fair for me to expect my partner to change? And anyone who's been in a relationship, whether it's short-term or long-term, knows that change is inevitable. So we all change. And the question here is it fair for me to expect my partner to change? And I use the term very often in our men's circles that change is inevitable and growth is optional, because it really is. We know change is the one thing we can count on, and the path of self-awareness and learning and being present and growth really is an optional one. So I use that saying a lot: change is inevitable and growth is optional. So let's start there. What's your take on this, being fair to expect my partner to change?
Well, I'm really glad we're talking about this, because it's entirely apropos, no matter what kind of relationship, even if we wanted to go so far as to say friendships, but let's leave it to the romantic partnership for our conversation today. Is it fair? Well, that's a loaded word, isn't it? The fair thing, like that, the two parts of your question, the fair and then the expectation, they're both loaded, right?
And the partner. So I underlined in my head those three words. So I'm glad you brought that up. So yes, we could define what fair is, even, because it could be very different for you and your partner, right?
Yes, 100%. So that would probably be a good way to start is what does fair mean? And that I would say would have to come from the person having the expectation. What do I think is fair for you? If you were my partner, what's fair? Well, what's probably a stretch would be some of the things that I might expect of my partner would be a stretch, therefore not fair. So I'd probably dig a little deep inside myself before I even started the process, saying you're treading on funny territory here by what's fair, because he or she will have a different idea of what fairness is all about. But I think bigger than that, Waska, is this thing called expectation. How far do we get to go, or do I get to go as an individual in a relationship with an expectation? And that has to be pretty specific. Like, if you expect your partner to be X, you better be clear on that. You better be clear on that for yourself. You better have made it crystal clear and within yourself in order for you to express that to your partner. And I guess early stages of a relationship, expectations are a certain way. You get into the relationship, you get into a bit of a groove. 6 months later, those expectations change. Then let's say, heaven forbid, you move in together. Holy smokes, now the expectations really change. So it's an ongoing, organic kind of moving target, I would say, all the time.
Interesting.
But I would say I'm a believer of having expectations, because they help set boundaries in the relationship. I don't know if I'm making myself really clear on that, but yes, we have to have expectations of each other. We have to have expectations of ourselves, and therefore expectations of the other. But it's that fair part that kind of gets.
Well, interesting way of looking at it. Yes, absolutely. So the fair part, and even the expectations, I think, comes back to what we've spoken about on other episodes before, also, is the communication, to speak with each other about what do we both feel is fair, which really gets into the third word also, the partnership, you know, being a partner. So to me, a partner is someone who you are, whether it's in relationship or business, in some kind of, you know, relationship with, that you have equal, hopefully, expectations, goals,
Yeah.
vision, whatever it is. So communicating what we each feel is fair, I think, is really important. And I always think back, as far as the expectation part, is that to have expectations is to leave yourself open for disappointment, which is true. But also, I do agree with you, expectations are not necessarily a bad thing. And to have expectations of yourself, of your partnership, I feel like as long as you have that communication in there, and it's not an expectation, well, I expect you to pick up your socks, or, you know, put the toilet seat down, or whatever it is. I think that's fair, as long as I have communicated that, because I think that a lot of the headbutting comes in when, yes, okay, he should know to put the toilet seat down and pick up his socks, but maybe he doesn't realize that it's something that's tweaking you. So when that communication happens and you say, hey, honey, you know, I'd really appreciate if you put the freaking toilet seat down so I don't fall in the middle of the night, and pick up your smelly socks and put them in the hamper, that would be wonderful, you know? So he's like, oh, okay, well, now I know. Just as an example. So I think it's, and having those expectations and communicating them are really key. So
and I would say even to use that specific word. So I can give you a real life example. Just happened in the last few days with my husband and I. I've mentioned before on the show that we've been together 30 years. And so if we don't know something about each other after 30 years, then we're both nuts. So we've got a really good thing going here for the most part, but we're considering traveling a little bit more now that things are opening up. So we're having coffee a couple of days ago, and I mentioned the fact that I'd like to go down to Florida. We have property down there, and I'm yearning for the sunshine. Like, we've been in Canada here for 2 years, lots of snow, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not complaining about Canada. I just need some sunshine. So we were having coffee and decided, yes, that it's worth looking into. And I could tell that we weren't on the same wavelength of who was going to get the ball rolling. So I said to him, which one of us, so this was an expectation. I started with the expectation, which one of us is going to go online and start looking at flights and, you know, looking at what needs to be organized, making sure we got all of our COVID stuff in order and all that kind of stuff. And he looked at me and he instantly said, well, you. Well, that wasn't clear to me, honey. Like, I think we're just sitting here chatting. He just, in his head, the expectation was that I'm probably the better person to do that, and blah, blah, blah. But unless I had said that, we'd be having coffee next week, and I'd say to him, did you look into any flights? And he'd say, I thought you were going to do it. Like that kind of stuff. Yeah. So that's again where that communication comes in handy. And we've also, he and I have gotten onto even emailing each other sometimes. If there's 2 or 3 steps to something that we're engaged in, something we're taking care of, I will email him and I'll say, based on our conversation, I believe you're doing X and I believe I'm doing Y. And then he'll just put an XO. He'll respond, put XO. And that's how we know that our expectations are going to be met. So we don't leave a lot to chance, I guess, is probably the best way to put it. Let's not leave a lot to chance, because it's too important just to get the words out and say, this is what I expect. Is this good for you? And if sometimes your partner has an expectation of you, I think it's completely appropriate sometimes if it's a big ask. If it's a big expectation, you know what? I need a day or two to think about that. I'm not sure I can meet your expectations.
Yeah.
And why not take that time instead of being in that people-pleasing mode where you right away say, sure, no problem. Maybe some of these expectations are a bit of a stretch, and you have to decide for yourself whether that's something that you can set as one of your own expectations. Because once you commit, you say it, you're freaking committed. You gotta do it, right?
Hopefully, anyway.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that's really important stuff. And getting back to the partnership aspect of it, to me, again, like, a partnership is really mainly about communicating, because things are going to come up, and again, there will be expectations, and if we don't communicate with each other and we don't have that true equanimity, honoring each other and telling each other what it is that we need, what it is that we want, what we expect, then how could the other person know, unless they're a mind reader, which, that's not usually the case. So like, to me, a partnership, it really is like being in like a good fit, being in conjunction with each other and saying, hey, can you do this? Will you do this? I'll do that. And you may not always agree on the things either, but at least when those expectations come, that's why I said in the beginning, like, to have expectations, can leave the door open for disappointment. And I think that's with a caveat when there's no communication about it.
Right. And I would say, I agree with you wholeheartedly, but I'm thinking back to another show that you and I had done where we talked about the importance of trust in a relationship. So I would put, like, some of these values that make for a healthier relationship, I would put those kind of neck and neck. Like, you learn to start to trust somebody, you're getting into a more grounded relationship with somebody, and then that communication thing is like right up there. If it would be like a severe or significant, for me, red flag.
We'll be right back after this. Hey guys, this is Waska. Listen, if you're hearing my voice, there are no coincidences. Are you ready to get unblocked and take the next step forward, whether it's with relationship issues, finances, or just moving into the next phase to elevate yourself? Listen, bros, this is what I do. I'm here for you. Drop me an email at Waska, that's WASKA, at ILLUMINATEDWarrior.com. We will work on this together and take you to the next step. I promise you'll be glad you did.
If I couldn't communicate openly and trust that person in my communication, or trust that they're going to be transparent and open back with me, I would call that a deal breaker. I would. Would you?
Does your husband know that? I guess he's still around, so.
Yeah, he's still around. We're good.
Yeah.
But
I do agree with that. Absolutely. So learning from my past relationships, communication and bringing these things like right to the table as early in the relationship as possible is really important, because if not, like so many relationships, just in the beginning of really any romantic relationship, it's just that it's the chemistry. It's like, ooh, and interesting enough, after X amount of time, it's like all of a sudden, like the things that you really adored about the person, like start potentially tweaking you, and like you don't adore them anymore. And things like that happen. And that's why they say, like, usually 2 years is the break point because that's when people truly start to reveal themselves. They drop the guard. They don't necessarily care or is focused anymore on what, being in their best possible light as they were in the beginning. So, to a degree, that's kind of like my philosophy when I go into a new relationship, or really any relationship. I'm at the point in my life, I feel pretty confident in who I am. I like who I am. I'm not trying to prove anything to anybody. So people are going to decide very, very quickly whether they want to be around me or not, So this is who I am. Yeah. Yes, if I'm going to be sarcastic, I'm not going to wait 2 years to be sarcastic. I'm going to be sarcastic right now. And, same with the good points and the bad points, if you will. I'm just going to, be authentic right from the get-go. And I think that's good, especially the older I get. I know I don't want to spend time and waste anybody else's time or my time not being in a relationship where we're, as you said, being truthful, being honest, and those are those important things to really foster a good relationship and build a
right. And to be, I love your philosophy because of, well, again, at our stage of the game, right? We're not 20, just trying to get into family mode and all that kind of stuff. But that authenticity, and I suspect, I highly suspect, because I know you well, that your authenticity radar, your expectation radar, your open communication radar is probably very, very strong. And so you're likely not to attract too many people into your life that couldn't handle Waska being himself. Just like, here I am, let's go. Yeah. And to have that full expectation back, right?
That's pretty true. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I'm thinking, because you're actively in the dating scene, right? I guess that's fair to say.
I'm out there. Yeah. I'm
Yeah,
exploring. I'm taking my notes really to be in service to the other guys. That's primarily what it is. You understand?
Perfect. We'll go with that. No, that's perfect. I'm just thinking, because you have experiences, right? Again, we're not 20. We've had
Right.
experiences in relationships, that you get to bring all the richness of what that would be, and the good, the bad, and the ugly, but you still, take that in as richness, into a brand new relationship. So you're meeting a potential partner for the first time, and let's say you go out for coffee. It wouldn't take long, I don't think, for you to sense or feel whether that other person was an authentic person, or maybe in fairness, not the first coffee. That's not fair, because people are pretty heightened and nervous. But over time,
Yeah, it works better with one or two bourbons rather than the coffee.
Oh, hey, I was
gonna
say it, but I don't know how much we're gonna promote that kind of stuff on our show.
I'm just saying, I've heard this works. I don't know for sure. But
hey, I'm Chardonnay girl. I totally get it.
Yeah, but that's a really good point. And it's definitely for myself. Yeah, my radar will detect the red flags, or just I look at nuances and things like that. But also do my best not to be judgy, because first impressions obviously are first impressions, but everybody has their own style of communicating, and people could be nervous, especially if you're on a first date type of thing. But I put it right out there, and I suggest to all the guys that I work with as well, that are getting into new relationships, or even to tool up their old relationships, that if you're going to hide something or not be truthful in who you are, and pretend you're somebody else just because you want somebody to like you, or you want to get something out of this relationship, it's not sustainable. It's not going to work. And it's really important, even more so, I feel, in almost anything else. Like in a new relationship, I communicate like, hey, I don't know you, you don't know me, we're getting to know each other. I am not judging you on anything that you're going to tell me that happened in your past. I'm going to really take you at face value for right now and assume the best. And I would hope you would do the same thing, because we all have, traumatic events and hurts and situations that have happened in the past that are very easy to bring up in our own heads and say, this, she reminds me of so-and-so, or this feels like that. And it's already going on a down spiral when you're doing that.
Just from you putting those kind of glasses on. Yeah, like you've got those glasses on that make you think that she's got something to do with someone else that you have had a relationship with. And and it triggers old things, so you don't want to do that if you want to. Would you say that, I guess this would be dependent on the person in front of you, Waska, but would you maybe over time feel comfortable, because you want to be real and authentic and transparent, saying to that person, there's some things about you that really remind me of someone that I was in a relationship with before. I'm just letting you know that. I'm working it through my own head, but I'm just letting you know that. Would I express that? Would you say that to somebody? I wonder.
Probably not, because, well, just for me, honestly, if that were the case, I would have to look at that. Like, am I repeating a pattern? Because honestly, I mean, I've done a lot of work in that regard, and I'm still working on it. I'm not 100%, like say clear of every past trauma or feeling, but I'm pretty cognizant of when I step into a new relationship. I always ask myself, am I being triggered because of, if I'm being triggered at all, or why am I feeling this, when this is absolutely has nothing to do with what's going on now. Those are the kind of things I would ask myself. And so if somebody reminded me of somebody else, I would look at that first. I don't think that would necessarily go over well. Like, you remind me of my ex who really used to push my buttons, and started with this, and I can't go out with somebody with a letter. And so I personally,
So that's actually what I was getting at is deciding for yourself how far you take something that might be an expectation, or which would be triggered by a past relationship or something like that, right? So you have to hold some of that true to yourself. Like the open communication isn't everything. You don't just go back
Right.
and tell everybody everything, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, sometimes I do, but I'm like, I wear my heart on my sleeves, and sometimes I'm like, I feel like, maybe I just said too much. I'm just like super honest. Some things maybe are better off left unsaid. It's not, it's nothing maybe it's something that could have waited for a few more, engagements together. But like, I just feel like, hey, this is me. I have nothing to hide, so I'm just going to put it out there. And if it's if it tweaks somebody, then hopefully we can communicate about it. But honestly, that's the way I am anyway. So for me to suppress things that I normally do, it doesn't seem to work for me. And I'd rather find out sooner rather than later. If I'm like pushing somebody's buttons because I'm a certain way, then, let's find out right now, and vice versa. But, normally people are on their best behavior when they first meet. I'm not. So,
You're just you. You just keep being
I'm just
you.
me,
That's all right.
Oh, that's true authenticity. I mean, it's not like I'm going to, use foul language. It's things that I don't do anyway. I'm not going to do, but I'm just me,
Right.
and I go with it, and it works for me. And I think, at the end of the day, that's to me is true authenticity. Just be who you are. I mean,
Yeah.
be respectful, have your integrity. Hopefully, if that's who you are. And so if you make a bad joke, I apologize. I do make some bad jokes, but most of them are pretty good and funny. So
I think you're a funny guy. I'm sure you've got the jokes down pat. Let me ask you though, Waska, I love our conversations because it keeps my mind nice and active. Has it worked for you in the past in other relationships where having a high expectation of your partner has worked for you and or them, or for your relationship together? So you have a conversation and you say, look, honey, this isn't working for me, or I have an expectation of this. It's not happening. Can we step up our game, or are you willing to step up your game to meet that expectation for me? And then it all goes well. Has that happened to you?
That's a great question. That's a really great question because I have been in that situation and have asked that question. And like going further back, I brought those things to light. I'm not going to really get into my marriage situation. I'll just say there was some mental health issues there. So,
Okay.
which, was part of the equation. But I would bring certain things to light and ask exactly what you're saying. And they were just not met with any kind of proactive anything. So, and at the time, went from like, okay, well, what can I do to change myself to help this situation and to heal and all that. And it just never really went in that direction. And, in hindsight, again, there's always two sides to every coin, which we've discussed before. So I can't just point my finger and say, well, this is her fault. She had these issues.
Yeah.
But also on to that point, in other relationships and that one, like I'm very, very sensitive. And I come from, I think it's from being raised in my role in the alcoholic family. Like it's hard for me to ask for things. So when I ask for something and I'm pretty sure the person has heard it, if I don't receive that, or if I ask for it a second time, usually I won't ask again. And I do internalize that, and I have taken it personally in the past. And that's not actually a very healthy way of being. I really should just continue with it and see it through. And I think that's why some relationships in the past have lasted longer than they have, when they probably should have had better communication or further communication. So it's a really great point. I'm glad you brought that up, because it's that's really important. Whatever the outcome is, whether it does elevate up or you just need to make other decisions or go other ways or communicate it in a different way. So How about yourself?
Yeah, same. No, in fact, it has worked well for me. Again, I'll just stick with my marital relationship, not my girlfriends or anything like that. But when my husband clearly communicates an expectation or something where he's not satisfied, that we have a gap between what he'd like to see happen and what Beth is doing or would like to see happen, damn it all, he's almost always right, for starters, which is really a pisser. Like that's hard to deal with. But fortunately, it doesn't happen a lot. I just know when he's thought it through, because he's a pretty soulful guy, pretty well-connected guy. It almost, I would even say 100% of the time, it makes me rise up. But
Nice.
I have to be willing to do that, right? First of all, I trust him, and I trust that he's not going to say something outrageous that is ridiculous for me to step up into. But it's almost always been he's always been such a great teacher, and me for him as well. It's just not him to me. But I always take what he says to heart, because I know where his heart is, where I'm concerned. He wants what's best for me. And if he has this expectation, sometimes I've had to say no, but then the times where I know he's right, it always brings me up to a better place, and then subsequently enhances our relationship as a result.
Excellent.
Yeah.
You got to make sure
Yeah.
he watches this episode. He's going to like this one. Yeah. But that's good also. Even what you're saying though, that's really important also, like to get out of the ego of like even you said he's right. Like a lot of people get hung up on that, like being right, like, do you want to be happy or do you want to be right? Because it's really not, that's like really kind of like an argumentative type of thing. Like I have to be right, and maybe right is just listening to the other person and empathizing with what they're saying, and then coming to some kind of happy medium. Maybe that's the right that everybody needs to, elevate your relationship, or at least communicate and have that partnership, and not expect that change, but to work through whatever transformation or transitions you need to have, to come to that place. And instead of like the expectation of like, okay, are you going to change for me?
Yeah. So we've done a good job here, because the beginning of our conversation, the statement remains the same, but we've softened it morphed it into a more palpable, I always say that word wrong, palpable discussion for people to have when they're in a relationship, because it sounds a little bit harsh and hard at the front end. Is it fair for you to expect change in your partnership, in your relationship? That sounds like, initially I'd go, no, it's not fair. Now we've softened it, and now we use it as a tool to help enhance ourselves individually and subsequently that relationship.
We've focused on the fair, the expectation, and the partnership, and those are all pretty powerful words that really need definition for each one of us to come to that place where we could understand each other. So, again, the communication, also the acceptance of what another person is feeling, what they're expressing to you, and the growth part. Like I said, change is inevitable and growth is optional. So, we could grow together or we could grow apart, and that's a choice also. Do we want to actually grow together in partnership? Partnership is working together, because that's by definition, that's what a partnership is. You're not doing your own thing and I'm not doing my own thing. We're doing it together for a common cause and purpose, and hopefully common vision. So, growing together.
And to remember that as we're putting these expectations on our partners, in a form of fairness, in a fair kind of way, that we still choose to be in this relationship. It's choice. Right. Yes. So you can certainly drift apart. And most people do, to be honest, most people do, but you got to ground yourself in the choosing, so that the fairness of it and the expectation of it reflects in the enhancement of that relationship. Yeah. Wow.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we are coming full circle. So to like kind of put a closing cap on this, like what would you, express or invite any of your friends or listeners or your clients to how to be and what to do in their relationship if they're having some of these expectations, if they're not happy necessarily in their partnership with their partner, in their relationship with their partner? What would you express to them that they can do? Asking this question.
Asking that. So first and foremost, I would say to anybody, including myself, take a few deep breaths and be sure that you're grounded and centered in what you think this expectation is, that it's not just a willy-nilly thing. And you saw a cute rom-com on TV last night and the guy was so perfect. And then, so I'm going to compare my husband to that perfect guy on the television yesterday. Like, that's ridiculous. So I would certainly encourage anyone to take a few deep breaths, because once the words come out of your mouth, if they're not grounded and they didn't come from a centered place, you cannot suck those babies back, right? And I've been there, done that.
We've all been there.
Times. Yeah, like, oh shit, why did I say that? But anyway, I would highly recommend that. I also highly recommend note taking for some of these they're delicate. They can be delicate. It's not as simple as saying, can you please put the socks in the hamper? Some of these are very delicate conversations. And I find that if I have a few little jots for myself, it kind of makes, I can leave that conversation knowing that I've taken care of the 2 or 3 points that I really wanted to take care of. So it's not as willy-nilly as just having coffee and saying, by the way, I have an expectation and this isn't going well for me and I want you to change. It's delicate. You're dealing with another human being and you're dealing with your own soulful self. So those are the 2 things I would say. Take time, take a few big breaths, spend some time by yourself, make sure you've got your ducks in order, and then approach it that way. Approach your partner that way.
Yeah, I like that. So I would just add to that, which is,
I was going to say, what would you add to that? Yeah.
Not to react, especially when you hear something, if your partner is making a demand or an expectation that immediately tweaks you. As you mentioned before, which I agree with, sometimes if you need to take the time, say, okay, let me just process and think about this, and I'll get back to you in, X amount of time. So not to react, more to respond to it. And like you said, great taking notes and all, maybe meditate on it, think on it, and put yourself out, like there's a third person kind of like viewing type of thing. Like what is this, my partner asking me? What are they asking of me? And how can I really be present to listen and empathize with, okay, if they're asking me this, it's important to them. Is it important to me to be in this relationship and to, make my partner feel that I'm listening and that I'm, honoring their requests, and then go from there, not to just immediately okay, well, I don't know about this and butting heads. To empathize and to just really hear what your partner's asking and decide, is it really important for me to go in this direction or to go in this direction? And
I love that. I love that you said that. That's just a really nice segue to everything else, or nice addition to everything else that we've been talking about. Well, we're wise people, Waska. We've got a few years of being in relationships.
I know we're not 20. You made sure to tell everybody we're not 20.
I know.
Okay?
Just
fine.
checking.
Thank you very much. So, well, this was wonderful, Beth. I think we shared some good nuggets again. Hopefully, the audience appreciated it. And as always, if anybody wants to, send in comments or questions or topics that they want to hear, Beth and I are happy to address those and shed some light on the topic. So, so thank you for joining me again, Beth. We will reconvene again soon. So, and for all the listeners, thank you for joining in, and please continue to join in, like and subscribe and do all that good stuff. And until next time, immense love and energy to everybody. Illuminate your paths with loving kindness.
Visit IlluminatedWarrior.com if you'd like to go deeper and find out more about what's available within the Illuminated Warrior Men's Transformational Community. Tune in next time for more candid conversations for men and women about men on the Way of the Illuminated Warrior Talk Show. Until next time, illuminate your path with loving kindness.